After closing a $9 million acquisition deal in Brussels, I drove my rental car through my childhood neighborhood, exhaustion weighing on my shoulders, but triumph filling my chest. 4 months of negotiations had finally paid off. I pulled into my parents' driveway expecting to see my restored 1973 Mustang Mach 1 sitting in the garage where I had left it 3 weeks ago. The car I had spent 4 years rebuilding with my own hands. Instead, I found an empty space and dark oil stains on the concrete. My heart stopped. I stormed through the front door demanding answers. Mom sat at the kitchen table with her coffee barely glancing up. "Oh, we sold your car to help Amanda with her bakery business," she said dismissively. "She needed it more than you do, Bernice." The words hit me like a physical blow. I stared at my mother, certain I had misheard. "You sold what?" My voice came out strangled, barely recognizable. Dad emerged from the living room newspaper, still in his hands. "Now don't get dramatic, Bernice. It was just sitting there collecting dust while your sister's business was struggling." Just sitting there. Those words echoed in my mind as I remembered every Saturday morning I had spent in that garage with Grandpa Joe, learning to rebuild that engine from scratch. I was 16 when I bought that rusted shell of a Mustang with money from my summer job at the hardware store. Grandpa had seen potential in both me and that car. "You don't understand," I whispered, my hands shaking. "That car meant everything to me." "Oh, please." Mom rolled her eyes. "You live in Chicago now making all that money. You never even drove it anymore." The dismissiveness in her tone cut deeper than any knife could have. This was the same woman who had watched me bleed knuckles and strain muscles for 4 years, transforming a heap of rusted metal into a pristine muscle car. The same woman who had seen me cry when Grandpa died during my junior year of college, leaving behind only his tools and the promise that I would finish our project. "How much did you sell it for?" I managed to ask. $28,000, Dad announced proudly. "Pretty good for an old car, if you ask me." My knees nearly gave out. $28,000. I had invested over $40,000 in parts alone, not counting the hundreds of hours of labor. The car was worth at least $60,000 to the right collector, maybe more given its pristine condition and original big block 429 engine. "Where is Amanda?" I demanded. "At the bakery, working hard to save her business," Mom said pointedly. "Unlike some people who just fly around making easy money." Easy money. I had worked 80-hour weeks for 5 years to reach my position as a senior acquisition specialist. I had earned my mechanical engineering degree from MIT on scholarship while working part-time jobs. I had built my career from nothing, just like I had rebuilt that Mustang. The front door slammed open and Amanda waltzed in, designer purse swinging from her shoulder. At 28, my younger sister had always been the favored child, the one who could do no wrong in our parents' eyes. Her blonde hair was perfectly styled, her makeup flawless, despite supposedly working all day. "Oh, good, you're back," she said, not even bothering to look guilty. "I was going to call you about the car, but Mom said not to bother you while you were on your important business trip." "You sold my car," I said flatly. "I used the money from your car," Amanda corrected. "There's a difference. Besides, you never drove it. It was just taking up space." The casual way she said it made my blood boil. That car belonged to me. I spent 4 years rebuilding it with Grandpa. "Well, Grandpa's dead and I needed the money for my bakery." Amanda shrugged. "Family should help family, right? That's what Mom always says." I looked at our parents, waiting for them to correct her, to acknowledge that what they had done was theft. Instead, Mom nodded approvingly at Amanda's words. "That's right," she said. "We raised you to help your family, Bernice. This attitude you've developed since you started making all that money is very disappointing." "What attitude?" I asked incredulously. "This selfish me-first mentality," Dad chimed in. Your sister is trying to build something real, something that helps the community. She's providing jobs and serving our neighbors. What are you doing just shuffling papers and making rich people richer?" The contempt in his voice was unmistakable. Here I was, having just closed a deal that would create over 300 jobs in the automotive sector, being lectured about contributing to society by people who had just stolen my most precious possession. But the worst was yet to come. As I pressed for details about the sale, a horrible truth emerged. They had not just sold my car for far less than it was worth. They had sold it to a collector named Marcus Webb, who immediately recognized its true value and flipped it at an auction in Las Vegas for $65,000. My parents had been swindled, and their ignorance had cost me not just my car, but an additional $25,000 in lost value. The car that represented 4 years of my life, my bond with my grandfather, and my mechanical expertise had been carelessly thrown away for a fraction of its worth. "Did you even try to call me before you sold it?" I asked, my voice deadly quiet. Mom and Dad exchanged glances. "We figured you'd just try to talk us out of it," Mom admitted. "You've gotten so stubborn about money since you moved to the city." Stubborn about money. I was careful with money because I had earned every dollar myself, because I knew the value of hard work and smart investments. Unlike Amanda, who had been bailed out by our parents more times than I could count. As I stood there in the kitchen where I had grown up, surrounded by the 3 people who were supposed to love and support me unconditionally, I realized that my success had somehow made me the villain in their eyes. My achievements were minimized, my hard work dismissed, and my possessions considered fair game for Amanda's endless financial crises. The foundation of everything I thought I knew about my family was cracking beneath my feet. I found Amanda the next morning at her bakery Sweet Dreams, located in a strip mall 20 minutes from our parents' house. The space was smaller than I remembered, with outdated equipment and a handful of day-old pastries in the display case. Only 2 customers sat at the mismatched tables, both elderly men reading newspapers and nursing cups of coffee that had probably been brewing for hours. "We need to talk," I said, approaching the counter where Amanda was scrolling through her phone. She looked up with an expression of mild annoyance. "If this is about the car again, I already told you I needed that money. My business is more important than your hobby." "Tell me about your finances," I said, pulling out my phone to record. "I want to understand exactly what kind of trouble you're in." Amanda's confident facade cracked slightly. "Why do you need to record this?" "Because I'm starting to think there's more to this story than anyone's telling me." For the next hour, Amanda reluctantly revealed the truth about her failing business. She owed $37,000 to food suppliers who had cut off her credit. Her rent was 4 months behind, totaling $11,000. She had maxed out 3 business credit cards, accumulating $25,000 in high-interest debt. The health department had cited her twice for equipment violations that would cost $8,000 to fix. "So you need at least $81,000 just to break even," I calculated. "It's not that simple," Amanda snapped. "I need working capital too, and money for marketing and—" "How much total?" She hesitated. "Maybe $120,000? The number hung in the air between us. $28,000 from my car had been a drop in the bucket compared to Amanda's real financial crisis. "How long has the business been losing money?" I asked. "It's not losing money, it's just going through a rough patch." "Amanda, how long?" 18 months, she whispered. 18 months. I felt sick as the implications hit me. How have you been surviving for 18 months without profit? Mom and Dad have been helping out. How much have they given you? I don't know exactly. Guess. Maybe 60,000 total. Our parents had given Amanda $60,000 over 18 months, draining their retirement savings to prop up a failing business. Meanwhile, they had never offered to help me with my student loans, my down payment on my Chicago apartment, or any of the other financial challenges I had faced while building my career. But there was more. As Amanda grew increasingly defensive under my questioning, she let slip another devastating truth. "Besides, they used money that should have been mine anyway," she said bitterly. "What money?" "Grandpa's estate money. They were supposed to split it between us, but they used my half for your college expenses." My blood turned to ice. "What are you talking about?" "When Grandpa died, he left $50,000. Mom and Dad said they'd save my $25,000 for when I needed it, but then they used it to pay off your student loans without telling me." The room started spinning. I had never known about any estate money. My parents had never mentioned receiving an inheritance from Grandpa. I had taken out loans for college and paid them off myself over 6 years, sacrificing vacations and living in a tiny apartment to make the payments. "You're lying," I said. "Ask them yourself," Amanda shot back. "They robbed me to pay for your fancy MIT education, and now you're upset that I got a little help with my business." I walked out of the bakery in a daze. If Amanda was telling the truth, then my parents had been manipulating both of us for years. They had used money intended for Amanda to secretly pay my debts, then told her that I was the favored child who got everything handed to me. Meanwhile, they had told me that I needed to be self-reliant and that Amanda deserved help because she was struggling. That evening, I confronted my parents about the estate money. They confirmed Amanda's story with obvious reluctance. "We thought it was better to invest in your education," Mom explained. "You were more likely to succeed than Amanda." "But you never told me about the money. You let me struggle to pay those loans myself." "We wanted you to learn responsibility," Dad said, "and look how well it worked out. You're successful now." "What about Amanda? You let her believe I had gotten special treatment." "Amanda needs to learn that life isn't fair," Mom said dismissively. "You earned your success. She expects everything to be handed to her." The hypocrisy was breathtaking. They had secretly used Amanda's inheritance to help me, then criticized both of us for the resulting resentment and misunderstandings. They had played us against each other for years, creating a dynamic where Amanda felt cheated and I felt guilty for a privilege I had never known I received. But the final blow came when I dug deeper into Amanda's business practices. She had not just borrowed money from our parents. She had been telling potential investors and lenders that she was in business with me, using my name and reputation to secure funding she could never qualify for on her own. "Amanda has been telling people what exactly?" I asked Mom. "Just that you're her business partner," Mom said defensively. "It helps her get better rates on loans." "I am not her business partner. I have never invested in her bakery. I didn't even know she was using my name." "It's just a little white lie," Dad said. "It's not hurting anyone." "It's fraud, Dad. It's identity theft. And it could destroy my professional reputation if anyone finds out." For the first time, my parents looked genuinely worried. They had been so focused on enabling Amanda that they had never considered the legal and professional consequences of their schemes. That night, I lay awake in my childhood bedroom, staring at the ceiling and trying to process everything I had learned. My family had stolen my car, lied about inheritance money, manipulated my relationship with my sister, and committed fraud using my identity, all in the name of family loyalty. I had spent my entire adult life trying to make them proud, working hard to build a career that would reflect well on our family name. Meanwhile, they had been systematically exploiting my success to enable Amanda's failures. The worst part was that they genuinely seemed to believe they were doing the right thing. In their minds, family meant covering for each other's mistakes and redistributing resources from the successful to the struggling. They could not understand that their help was actually preventing Amanda from learning to take responsibility for her own choices. As dawn broke through my bedroom window, I made a decision that would change everything. I was done being the family bank account. I was done having my achievements minimized and my possessions treated as community property. I was done enabling a system that rewarded failure and punished success. It was time for my family to learn what real accountability looked like. The family meeting Mom called for Sunday dinner felt like a tribunal. I sat across from my parents and Amanda at the same kitchen table where we had shared thousands of meals growing up. But this time, the atmosphere was poisoned with unspoken accusations and growing desperation. "We need to settle this car situation once and for all," Mom announced, her voice carrying the stern authority she had used when Amanda and I were children fighting over toys. "Bernice, you're being unreasonable about this whole thing." "Unreasonable?" I kept my voice level, though my heart was pounding. "Yes, unreasonable," Dad jumped in. "We raised you, sacrificed for you, put a roof over your head for 18 years. We paid for your food, your clothes, your school supplies. Do you have any idea how much money we spent on you growing up?" The familiar guilt trip that had worked so well throughout my childhood, but I was no longer a child seeking parental approval. "And we're not asking for much in return," Mom continued. "Just for you to help your sister in her time of need. That's what families do." Amanda sat silently, arms crossed, wearing a smug expression that suggested she knew this intervention would go her way. She had always been confident that our parents would take her side in any dispute. "I've helped Amanda plenty over the years," I said quietly. "Remember when she needed $5,000 for her wedding, I gave it to her. When she wanted to take that pastry course in San Francisco, I paid for it. When she needed a cosigner for her bakery lease, I provided references that helped her qualify." "That's different," Mom waved dismissively. "Those were gifts. This is about being there when family really needs you." "She stole my car?" "She borrowed the money from the sale of your car," Dad corrected. "And she'll pay you back when the bakery becomes profitable." When, not if, they still believed Amanda's failing business would somehow turn around despite 18 months of losses and mounting debt. "How exactly is she going to pay me back when she owes over $100,000 to creditors?" I asked. "The bakery will turn around." Amanda spoke for the first time, her voice defensive. "I just need time to build my customer base." "You've had 18 months. The market is tough right now. Once the economy improves—" I had heard enough excuses. "Amanda, your bakery is failing because you don't understand basic business principles. You're selling products at a loss, your overhead is too high for your location, and you have no marketing strategy." "I don't need business advice from someone who's never run a real business," Amanda snapped. "I've analyzed dozens of businesses for acquisition deals. I know what failure looks like." "That's enough," Mom interrupted. "Both of you stop this arguing. Bernice, you will forgive Amanda for the car, and Amanda, you will be more grateful for your sister's help." The casual way she dismissed my feelings was the final straw. I looked at my mother, the woman who had taught me to ride a bike and helped me with homework, and saw a stranger who cared more about maintaining false peace than addressing real problems. "There's something else you should know," I said calmly. They all looked at me expectantly. "Amanda has been using my name to get loans for her business. She's been telling lenders that I'm her business partner." Amanda's face went pale. "That's not— I never said—" "I have documentation," I continued. "Text messages where you refer to me as your partner. Loan applications that list me as a reference without my knowledge. Bank records that show you used my professional credentials to secure better terms." "Now wait a minute," Dad said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Do you understand what this means?" I asked my parents. "She committed fraud. She forged my signature on documents. She used my identity without permission." "It was just to help her business," Mom said weakly. "It was identity theft. It's a federal crime." The room went silent except for the ticking of the old clock on the wall. Amanda was staring at the table, no longer able to meet my eyes. My parents looked confused and frightened, as if they were finally beginning to grasp the seriousness of what they had enabled. "But you're not going to press charges," Mom said, her voice pleading. "She's your sister." I looked at Amanda sitting there in her designer clothes, wearing jewelry that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent, surrounded by the debris of her failed business and fraudulent schemes. She had taken my car, stolen my identity, and destroyed my trust. But she still expected me to protect her from the consequences of her choices. That's when I said the 6 words that changed everything. She committed fraud in my name. Mom's face fell. The color drained from her cheeks as she realized I was not backing down, not accepting their manipulation, not enabling Amanda's behavior anymore. "Bernice, you can't be serious," she whispered. I pulled out my phone and showed them the screen where my lawyer's number was already dialed. "I've been investigating since yesterday," I said. "Title forgery is a felony in this state. Using someone's identity to secure loans is federal fraud. Amanda has committed multiple serious crimes." Amanda finally looked up, and I saw real fear in her eyes for the first time. "You wouldn't," she said. "Try me." Dad leaned forward, his hand shaking. "This would destroy her life." "She destroyed her own life when she chose to commit fraud. I'm just making sure there are consequences." The weight of real accountability was finally settling on them. For years, they had protected Amanda from facing the results of her poor choices. They had bailed her out, made excuses for her, and enabled her increasingly reckless behavior. But they could not protect her from federal law enforcement. "Please," Mom begged, "there has to be another way." I looked at each of them in turn. My parents, who had raised me to believe that family was everything, but had shown me that family loyalty only flowed one direction. Amanda, who had taken my love and support and turned it into a weapon against me. "There is another way," I said finally. They leaned forward hopefully. "Amanda pays back every cent she stole plus damages for the fraud. She stops using my name for anything. She takes full responsibility for her business debts without involving our parents. And all of you acknowledge what you did wrong." "That's impossible," Amanda protested. "I don't have that kind of money." "Then you'll figure out how to get it. You'll sell your house, liquidate your assets, get a job that pays real money. You'll learn what accountability looks like." "And if she refuses?" Dad asked. I held up my phone finger, hovering over the call button. "Then I make this call and she learns about accountability in federal prison." The silence that followed was deafening. For the first time in my life, I held real power in this family dynamic, not the power of success or money, but the power of justice and consequences. Amanda began to cry, but they were not tears of remorse. They were tears of self-pity, the tears of someone who had finally been cornered and could no longer manipulate her way out of trouble. My parents looked at me as if I had become a stranger. In their minds, I had transformed from the dutiful daughter who could be guilted into compliance into someone who would actually enforce boundaries and demand justice. They were right. I had become exactly that person. And there was no going back. Monday morning, I called in sick to work for the first time in 3 years. Instead of flying back to Chicago, I drove to the office of Patricia Martinez, the forensic accountant my lawyer had recommended. Her downtown practice specialized in fraud investigation, and her reputation for thoroughness was exactly what I needed. "Based on what you've told me, this isn't just family drama," Patricia said, spreading Amanda's financial documents across her conference table. "This is a complex pattern of financial fraud that could involve multiple felony charges." Over the next 6 hours, we dissected Amanda's business records with surgical precision. What we found was far worse than I had imagined. Amanda had not just borrowed money using my name. She had created an elaborate web of deception that involved dozens of creditors, suppliers, and even potential business partners. On loan applications to 3 different banks, she had listed me as a co-owner of Sweet Dreams Bakery. She had forged my signature on a commercial lease agreement. She had even created fake invoices showing payments from my consulting business to her bakery, making it appear that I was a major customer. "Look at this," Patricia said, pointing to a bank statement. She opened a business account using your social security number as a tax identification number. Technically, you're legally responsible for all debts associated with this account. My blood ran cold. How much? $47,000 in overdraft fees and unpaid charges. Amanda had not just stolen my car and forged my signature. She had created legal liability that could follow me for years, potentially damaging my credit and creating tax complications. But the scope of her fraud extended far beyond our family. Patricia had tracked down suppliers and vendors who had been deceived by Amanda's claims about my involvement in her business. She told the flower distributor that you were personally guaranteeing all orders, Patricia explained. They extended her credit based on your MIT alumni directory listing and your LinkedIn profile showing your position at Morrison Acquisitions. We spent the afternoon calling Amanda's creditors. Each conversation revealed new layers of deception. The commercial kitchen equipment company had leased Amanda $20,000 worth of ovens and mixers based on her claim that I was her silent partner. When payments stopped coming, they had tried to contact me directly, but Amanda had given them a fake phone number. The specialty food distributor had advanced Amanda $12,000 in inventory after she showed them fabricated contracts claiming I had committed to purchasing products for corporate events. Most heartbreaking was the conversation with Maria Santos, an elderly woman who owned a small restaurant supply business. Amanda had convinced Maria to provide ingredients on credit by claiming she was expanding her bakery with her successful sister's investment. I trusted her because she talked so much about her sister who went to MIT. Maria told me, her voice thick with disappointment. She said you were proud of her business and wanted to help her serve the community. I gave her $8,000 worth of supplies over 6 months. Maria's business was struggling too, and $8,000 represented a significant loss for her family. Amanda had not just defrauded institutions and banks. She had stolen from hardworking people who could barely afford the loss. The investigation revealed that Amanda's fraud was not impulsive or accidental. She had systematically researched my professional background, copied my signature style, and created detailed lies about our relationship. She had even gone so far as to register Sweet Dreams Bakery with the state as a partnership, listing me as a 50% owner without my knowledge or consent. This makes you legally liable for all business debts, Patricia explained. If Amanda defaults on her obligations, creditors can come after your personal assets. The ramifications were staggering. Amanda's failing business could cost me my savings, my Chicago apartment, possibly even my job, if clients learned I was associated with fraudulent business practices. But the most shocking discovery came when we reviewed Amanda's husband, Derek's financial records. He had agreed to let us examine his bank statements, confused by inconsistencies in what Amanda had told him about their finances. "Look at these withdrawals," Patricia said. "Every month for the past year, Amanda has been transferring money from Derek's business account to cover bakery expenses." Derek owned a small but profitable landscaping company. He had been working 60-hour weeks to support their lifestyle while Amanda's bakery hemorrhaged money. But he had never known where his profits were going. "She told me the bakery was breaking even," Derek said when I called him with our findings. "She said the transfers were for household expenses." $23,000 of Derek's hard-earned money had been funneled into Amanda's failing business without his knowledge. She had been stealing from her own husband while claiming to be a successful entrepreneur. "Derek, there's something else," I said gently. "Amanda has been planning to leave town." Patricia had found travel websites in Amanda's browser history searches for flights to cities with no extradition treaties and inquiries about opening bank accounts in other states. "What do you mean?" Derek asked, his voice hollow. "She's been researching how to disappear. I think she was planning to take whatever money she could grab and start over somewhere else." The silence on the phone lasted so long I thought the call had dropped. She took out a credit card in my name last month, Derek finally said. She said it was for business expenses. Another piece of the puzzle fell into place. Amanda was not just defrauding creditors and family members. She was preparing to abandon her husband with all the debt while she escaped to start a new life with stolen money. By evening, Patricia had compiled a report that read like a prosecutor's dream case. Amanda had committed mail fraud, wire fraud, identity theft, forgery, and embezzlement. The total amount of her fraudulent activities exceeded $150,000 when including the forged debts that made me liable. You have enough evidence to put her in federal prison for 10 years, Patricia said. The U.S. Attorney's Office takes this kind of systematic fraud very seriously. I drove back to my parents' house that night with a heavy heart. I had hoped to find that Amanda's crimes were limited to the car and a few foolish mistakes. Instead, I had uncovered a criminal enterprise that had victimized dozens of people and threatened to destroy multiple families. The girl I had grown up with, who I had taught to ride a bike and helped with her homework, had become someone I no longer recognized. She had not just betrayed my trust, she had become a predator who targeted the people who cared about her most. As I parked in the driveway where my Mustang should have been, I realized there was no going back to the family relationships we had before. Too much damage had been done, too many lies had been told, and too many people had been hurt. The only question now was whether Amanda would face justice in a courtroom or find some way to make amends before law enforcement made that choice for her. Tuesday morning, I assembled what Amanda would later call my army of lawyers. Criminal attorney Robert Chen specialized in white-collar fraud cases. Civil litigation lawyer Susan Morrison had 20 years of experience in financial recovery cases. Patricia Martinez continued as our forensic accountant. Together, we developed a strategy that would either force Amanda to take responsibility or ensure she faced the full consequences of her crimes. First priority is protecting you from liability, Robert explained during our emergency meeting. We need to immediately file documentation with every institution involved showing that you were the victim of identity theft. Second priority is recovering your assets and compensating the other victims, Susan added. We can pursue civil damages while the criminal investigation proceeds. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. We would give Amanda 72 hours to voluntarily begin making restitution before criminal charges were filed. During that time, we would contact every person she had defrauded, offering them evidence they could use to recover their losses and protection from her further schemes. But I had one personal mission that went beyond legal strategy. I wanted my car back. Marcus Webb, the collector who had purchased my Mustang from my parents, owned a classic car dealership in Phoenix. When I called him, he was surprisingly sympathetic to my situation. I wondered why the sellers seemed so eager to get rid of such a valuable car, Marcus said. The condition was exceptional and the provenance was impressive. I suspected something wasn't right. What do you mean by provenance? I asked. Your Mustang wasn't just any Mach 1. According to the documentation, it was one of only 12 cars built with that specific engine and transmission combination for the 1973 model year. It had been featured in Classic Muscle Car magazine back in 1998 as an example of perfect restoration. My heart stopped. Grandpa had never mentioned any magazine feature. He had just said we were building something special. How much is it really worth? I asked, though I was almost afraid to hear the answer. I sold it at auction for $93,000, Marcus said. But honestly, to the right collector who appreciated its rarity and the quality of the restoration work, it could be worth $130,000 or more. $130,000. My parents had sold a car worth more than most people's houses for $28,000. They had not just stolen my property, they had cost me over $100,000 through their ignorance and greed. Marcus, would you be willing to sell it back to me? There was a long pause. You know what I feel terrible about this whole situation? I'll sell it back to you for exactly what I paid your parents, $28,000. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt a glimmer of hope. Getting my car back would not undo the betrayal, but it would restore something precious that I thought was lost forever. "There's one condition," Marcus added. "I want to help you expose what your family did. This kind of fraud hurts the entire classic car community. People need to know that family members can be victims too." That afternoon, my legal team began executing our plan with military precision. Robert filed criminal complaints with the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit, providing them with Patricia's comprehensive report. The federal agents were particularly interested in Amanda's use of interstate commerce to commit fraud, which made her crimes fall under federal jurisdiction. Susan sent certified letters to every business Amanda had defrauded, offering them free legal assistance in recovering their losses. The response was overwhelming. Within hours, our office was flooded with calls from victims who had never realized they might have legal recourse. I personally called Derek to warn him about what was coming. "Amanda is about to be arrested," I told him. "You need to protect yourself financially and legally." "I can't believe this is really happening," Derek said, his voice shaky. "I thought I knew her." "None of us really knew her," I replied, "but you still have time to salvage your life if you act quickly." Derek filed for legal separation that afternoon, protecting his landscaping business from Amanda's debts and ensuring he could not be held responsible for any additional fraudulent activities. But the most satisfying moment came when I called my parents to inform them of the legal proceedings. "Criminal charges?" Mom's voice was barely a whisper. "Federal criminal charges," I confirmed. "Mail fraud, wire fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy. She could face 15 years in prison." "But she's your sister," Dad pleaded. "Surely you can work something out." I tried to work something out. I gave her a chance to take responsibility and make restitution. Instead, I discovered that her crimes were far worse than anyone imagined. "What do you want from us?" Mom asked. "I want you to stop enabling her. I want you to acknowledge that what she did was wrong, and I want you to understand that actions have consequences." "We never meant for things to go this far," Dad said. "But they did go this far, and now everyone has to live with the results." That evening, I received a panicked call from Amanda. "The FBI came to my house," she said, her voice hysterical. "They took my computer and all my business records." That's what happens when you commit federal crimes. "You have to stop this. I'm your sister." "You stopped being my sister when you stole my identity and betrayed everyone who trusted you." "I'll pay you back," she promised. "I'll find a way to get the money." "It's too late for promises, Amanda. You had your chance to do the right thing." "Please," she begged. "I'll lose everything." "You already lost everything. You just haven't admitted it yet." Wednesday morning brought news that validated our strategy. Amanda's bank accounts had been frozen by court order. Her house was being placed in receivership to protect Derek's assets. Sweet dreams. Bakery had been closed by the health department for unpaid violations. But most importantly, the FBI had recovered evidence of Amanda's planned escape. She had booked a flight to Costa Rica under a false name, using a credit card she had opened in Derek's name. If we had waited even a week longer to act, she might have disappeared with thousands of dollars in stolen money. The net was closing around Amanda, and she was finally beginning to understand that there would be no family bailout this time. No one was going to save her from the consequences of her choices. For the first time in years, justice was not just a concept, but an actual possibility. The phone call came at 6:30 Thursday morning. My mother's voice was raw from crying. "They arrested Amanda," she said. "FBI agents came to the house at dawn with a warrant." I had been expecting this call since our legal team filed the criminal complaints 3 days earlier. Federal prosecutors moved quickly when they had airtight cases, and Amanda's fraud was so well documented that conviction was virtually guaranteed. "Where is she now?" I asked, though I felt no satisfaction in my sister's downfall. "The federal detention center downtown. They said she's a flight risk because of the fake passport they found in her car." Fake passport. Amanda's criminal activities had apparently extended even further than our investigation had revealed. The woman my parents had babied and protected for 28 years had become someone capable of sophisticated federal crimes. "The bail hearing is this afternoon," Mom continued. Could you possibly—" "And no," I said firmly, "I will not post bail for someone who stole my identity and defrauded dozens of people." "She's our daughter," Mom pleaded. "She's a criminal," I replied, "and it's time you accepted that." The media attention started that same day. A reporter from the local newspaper had gotten hold of court documents detailing Amanda's fraud scheme, and the story of a successful businesswoman's sister stealing her identity proved irresistible to news outlets. Local entrepreneur arrested in federal fraud case. Read the headline in the business section. The article described Amanda's systematic deception and the network of victims she had created. Thankfully, my name was kept confidential as the victim of identity theft, but Amanda's full legal troubles were detailed extensively. By Thursday evening, I was receiving calls from colleagues who had seen the story. Instead of the professional embarrassment, I had feared their reactions were uniformly supportive. "I can't believe your own family did this to you," said Janet Morrison, my supervisor at the acquisition firm. "How are you holding up?" "It's been difficult," I admitted, "but I'm learning that sometimes the people closest to you can cause the most damage." "Take all the time you need," Janet assured me, "and if you need any professional references for legal proceedings, we're behind you completely." Similar calls came from clients and business partners throughout the week. Rather than damaging my reputation, Amanda's arrest had demonstrated my integrity and commitment to accountability. The business community respected someone who would pursue justice even against family members who betrayed their trust. Meanwhile, Amanda's world was collapsing around her. Derek had filed for divorce and was seeking damages for the money she had stolen from his business. The IRS had opened an investigation into the fake business filings she had created using my identity. Her mortgage company was foreclosing on their house due to missed payments and fraudulent loan applications. But Amanda was not accepting responsibility gracefully. According to Derek, who visited her in jail, she was still playing the victim. "She claims you set her up," Derek told me during a phone call. "She says you planted evidence and manipulated our parents into selling your car just so you could frame her for fraud." The delusion was breathtaking. Amanda had constructed an alternate reality where she was the victim of an elaborate conspiracy rather than a criminal who had been caught red-handed. "She also told the other inmates that she's pregnant," Derek added. "She's not pregnant. We haven't been intimate in months. But she thinks claiming pregnancy might get her sympathy from the judge." The lies kept coming even from behind bars. Amanda apparently could not stop herself from manipulating situations, even when those manipulations served no purpose other than temporary attention and sympathy. Friday brought the most devastating development yet. Patricia Martinez called with news that made my blood run cold. "We found another victim," she said. "Amanda had been planning something much bigger than anyone realized." Through forensic analysis of Amanda's seized computer files, investigators had discovered correspondence with a potential investor named Harold Steinberg, a retired businessman who had been interested in franchising bakery locations. She convinced him to wire $50,000 as a down payment for exclusive franchise rights, Patricia explained. "She used your professional credentials to build credibility, claiming you had done the financial analysis and legal structuring." Harold was 82 years old, living on a fixed income, and that $50,000 represented a significant portion of his retirement savings. Amanda had targeted a vulnerable elderly man and stolen money he could not afford to lose. "The transfer went through yesterday," Patricia continued. "If we hadn't acted when we did, she would have disappeared with Harold's life savings, along with everything else." This revelation changed everything for me emotionally. Until now, I had been focused on my own victimization and the abstract concept of justice. But Harold Steinberg represented something more personal. He was someone's grandfather, someone who had worked his entire life to save money for retirement, someone who had trusted a young woman's lies about her successful sister. Amanda had not just betrayed our family, she had become a predator who targeted the elderly and vulnerable. Saturday morning, the walls finally closed in completely. Amanda's court-appointed attorney called to request a plea negotiation meeting. Ms. Patterson is prepared to admit guilt to multiple federal charges, the lawyer explained. In exchange, she requests consideration for a reduced sentence based on her cooperation and willingness to make full restitution. "What kind of restitution?" Robert Chen asked during our conference call. "She's prepared to liquidate all assets and establish a payment plan for the remaining balance." "How long would this payment plan last?" I asked. "Given the total amount of damages, approximately 8 years of supervised payments." 8 years. Amanda would spend nearly a decade paying back the money she had stolen, assuming she could find employment and maintain steady income after serving her federal sentence. Sunday night, I sat in my childhood bedroom and reflected on how quickly everything had changed. 1 week ago, I had been a successful businesswoman with a close, if complicated, family relationship. Now I was the victim of federal fraud, estranged from my parents, and about to send my sister to prison. But I felt no regret about the path I had chosen. Amanda's arrest had prevented her from victimizing more innocent people. The legal process would ensure that her victims received compensation. Most importantly, the cycle of enablement and manipulation that had defined our family dynamics for decades was finally broken. My parents were learning that their method of helping Amanda had actually hurt her by preventing her from facing consequences for increasingly serious mistakes. Amanda was learning that charm and manipulation could not protect her from federal law enforcement, and I was learning that sometimes love requires enforcing boundaries even when those boundaries destroy relationships. The walls had closed in around Amanda not because of my vindictiveness, but because justice had finally caught up with someone who had spent years evading accountability. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt like the truth was more powerful than the lies. 3 months later, I stood in the federal courthouse watching Amanda accept responsibility for her crimes. Dressed in an orange jumpsuit, her hair unkempt, and her usual confidence completely gone, she looked like a different person from the smug woman who had dismissed my concerns about my stolen car. I plead guilty to 4 counts of wire fraud, 3 counts of mail fraud, 2 counts of identity theft, and 1 count of conspiracy to commit financial fraud, Amanda said, her voice barely audible. Judge Patricia Williams reviewed the extensive evidence Patricia Martinez and my legal team had compiled. The final tally of Amanda's crimes was staggering. She had defrauded 23 individuals and businesses for a total of $187,000 over 18 months. Ms. Patterson, Judge Williams said sternly, your crimes were not impulsive mistakes or momentary lapses in judgment. They represent a sustained pattern of deliberate deception that victimized hardworking people and damaged the trust that makes business relationships possible. The sentence was fair but firm, 2 years in federal prison followed by 5 years of supervised probation, during which Amanda would be required to maintain employment and pay restitution to all victims. Every cent she earned above basic living expenses would go toward repaying the people she had defrauded. The court notes that your cooperation with investigators and willingness to accept responsibility are mitigating factors, the judge continued. However, the scope and systematic nature of your fraud requires serious consequences. As Amanda was led away by federal marshals, I felt neither satisfaction nor sadness. Justice was not about revenge or punishment for its own sake. It was about ensuring that actions had consequences and that victims received compensation for their losses. The civil settlement negotiations took another 2 months, but the results exceeded my expectations. Amanda's house sold for enough money to cover Harold Steinberg's stolen retirement funds and compensate most of the small business owners she had defrauded. Her remaining assets, including jewelry and furniture, were liquidated to establish a victim compensation fund. The most meaningful moment came when I received a call from Marcus Webb in Phoenix. "Your car is ready for pickup," he said. "I had my restoration team go over every detail to make sure it's exactly as you remember it." Driving to Phoenix to collect my Mustang felt like a pilgrimage. When Marcus led me into his showroom and I saw the car under fluorescent lights, tears came to my eyes. It looked exactly as it had the last day Grandpa and I worked on it together, down to the custom pinstriping he had taught me to apply. "There's something else," Marcus said, handing me a manila envelope. "I found this tucked behind the spare tire when I was detailing the car." Inside the envelope was a handwritten note from Grandpa dated just weeks before his death. "Bernice," the note read, "if you're reading this, it means you've had to fight for something that belongs to you. This car represents more than transportation or hobby. It represents the value of honest work, attention to detail, and never accepting substandard results. Whatever challenge brought you here, remember that character is built by how we respond to adversity. I'm proud of the woman you've become. Love, Grandpa Joe." Sitting in my restored Mustang in Marcus Webb's parking lot, reading Grandpa's words, I finally understood that this whole experience had been about more than a car or money or family relationships. It had been about defining what kind of person I was willing to be when faced with betrayal and injustice. The drive back to my parents' house gave me time to process everything that had happened. Amanda was in federal prison, learning accountability for the first time in her adult life. Derek had successfully separated his finances from her debts and was rebuilding his landscaping business. The victims of her fraud were receiving compensation. Justice had been served. But the most important changes had occurred within our family relationships. My parents had spent the past 6 months in family therapy working to understand how their enabling behavior had contributed to Amanda's criminal mindset. Dad had taken a part-time job to help pay legal expenses, and Mom had volunteered at a nonprofit that helped fraud victims, gaining perspective on the damage Amanda had caused. "We realize now that we never did Amanda any favors by protecting her from consequences," Mom said during our first real conversation in months. "We thought we were being loving parents, but we were actually preventing her from growing up." Dad was even more direct. "We treated you unfairly because you were successful," he admitted. "We took your achievements for granted and focused all our attention on Amanda's problems. That was wrong." The acknowledgement felt better than any apology could have. My parents were not just saying sorry, they were demonstrating understanding of how their actions had affected both daughters. Amanda's transformation was slower but more profound. Prison had stripped away her ability to manipulate situations or avoid responsibility. For the first time in her life, she was completely accountable for her choices and their consequences. 6 months into her sentence, I received a letter from her that showed genuine remorse rather than self-pity. "I don't expect you to forgive me," Amanda wrote. "I destroyed your trust and hurt people who didn't deserve it. I'm using my time here to get therapy and understand why I thought lying and stealing were acceptable. I want to be someone you could be proud to call your sister again, even if that takes years." The letter was a start, though rebuilding trust would require consistent actions over time, not just words. A year after Amanda's sentencing, Derek and I developed an unexpected friendship. He had always been caught in the middle of our family drama, and we found common ground in our experiences of being manipulated by someone we loved. "She wasn't always dishonest," Derek told me during one of our coffee meetings. "But the lying got worse as her business started failing. Success became more important to her than integrity." Derek's forgiveness and willingness to visit Amanda in prison demonstrated a kind of grace I was still working toward. He had been her primary victim after me, yet he maintained hope for her rehabilitation. The business community's response continued to surprise me. Rather than damaging my professional reputation, my handling of Amanda's fraud had enhanced my credibility. Clients appreciated working with someone who demonstrated integrity even in personal relationships. "You showed us what accountability looks like," Janet Morrison told me during my performance review. "That kind of character is exactly what we want representing our firm." 2 years after Amanda's arrest, she was released to a halfway house where she would complete her transition back to society. She had lost weight, her hair was streaked with premature gray, and she carried herself with a humility I had never seen before. Our first face-to-face conversation was awkward but honest. "I can't undo what I did," Amanda said, "but I can commit to never being that person again." "How do I know this isn't just another manipulation?" I asked. "You don't," she admitted. "I'll have to prove it through my actions, probably for the rest of my life." Amanda found employment as a bookkeeper for a small accounting firm work that utilized her mathematical skills while keeping her away from customer-facing roles where her past might create problems. Every month, she sent payments to the Victim Compensation Fund, slowly fulfilling her legal obligations. 3 years after the federal courthouse sentencing, our family gathered for Thanksgiving dinner, the first holiday we had shared since the car theft. The conversation was different now, more honest and less focused on maintaining false harmony. "I'm grateful for what happened," Amanda said during our traditional sharing circle. "Not grateful for the pain I caused, but grateful that someone finally forced me to face the truth about my behavior." Mom and Dad had aged visibly during the ordeal, but they seemed more at peace with themselves. They had learned to show love through support rather than enabling, and they had rebuilt relationships with both daughters based on honesty rather than manipulation. As for me, I had learned that family loyalty meant holding each other accountable to high standards, not protecting each other from consequences. Real love sometimes requires difficult choices that feel like betrayal in the moment, but prove to be salvation in the long run. Driving home that Thanksgiving evening in my restored Mustang windows down and classic rock playing on the radio, I reflected on Grandpa's letter and the lesson it contained. Character really was built by how we respond to adversity. The betrayal that had nearly destroyed our family had ultimately made us stronger and more honest with each other. The car's engine hummed with the same power and precision Grandpa and I had built into it years earlier, but now it represented something more than mechanical excellence. It symbolized the value of standing up for principles, fighting for what's right, and never accepting substandard treatment from anyone, even family. Some stories end with everyone happy and everything forgiven. This story ends with something more valuable, everyone accountable, and everything honest. Amanda learned that actions have consequences. My parents learned that love requires boundaries. And I learned that sometimes protecting family means refusing to enable their worst impulses. The road ahead was not perfect, but it was built on truth instead of lies, and that made all the difference. Have you ever faced a situation where standing up for what's right meant risking important relationships? Sometimes the people we love most are the ones who test our boundaries the hardest. I'd love to hear your thoughts on family loyalty versus personal accountability in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please give it a like, subscribe for more real-life stories about overcoming betrayal and finding justice, and share this with anyone who might need to hear that it's okay to demand respect even from family. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that your integrity is worth protecting no matter what it costs. Stay strong, and I'll see you in the next one.